Chapter 9 of Tractate Nedarim continues discussing the laws of vows, now on the topic of the nullification of vows. The first Mishnah says, some say we find an opening to annul a vow for the sake of honoring the man's parents. Others disagree, but they concede the point. Some say you can find an opening to annul a vow based on the honor of God. Others disagree, as then there would be no more vows. It's also disputed if you can find an opening to release a vow based on a new development. For instance, if somebody vowed against benefiting from somebody and that person becomes a Torah scholar or married off his son, or similar, and then the vower said he wouldn't have made the vow if this had been the case before, or if somebody vows against entering a house and then it becomes a synagogue and he said he wouldn't have made the vow if that was the case beforehand. So in all those cases, it's disputed. The Gemara says, when it says a vow that couldn't be annulled because of God's honor would end up preventing vows, that means that no more vows could be annulled properly. Others disagree and say it means vows will no longer be annulled before sages. It's debated and says this latter concern doesn't apply by annulling vows due to the honor of your parents, as if people are typically annulling vows before sages, they'll do it there too anyways. It also cites the sources for the logics behind the dispute as to whether you can annul a vow based on new data. These are further discussed, and there are additional points on this new Mishnah. Some say, in regards to new developments, there are some occurrences which don't constitute as a new occurrence, and others disagree. For instance, if a man vows against marrying a woman as her father is wicked, and the father either dies or repents, or if he vows against entering a house as there is an evil dog within or a snake, and he's told the dog or snake died, these are like new developments, but also not, so it's disputed if this nullifies the vow. The Gemara says the father dying is actually a new development, so either the cases where the vow is dependent on the father's death, so it's just automatically annulled without there needing to be any new developments. Others say that he was told that the father died before the oath was made. Others dispute this. New Mishnah. We also find an opening to annul vows based on the Torah, so we ask, would he have vowed if he knew the verses about not taking revenge, bearing a grudge, loving your fellow as yourself, etc., and the man says he wouldn't have made the vow if he knew this? In that case, the vow can be annulled. The Gemara discusses related points on charity. New Mishnah. We find an opening to annul a vow based on the obligation to pay a marriage contract. It gives an instance if a man vowed against benefiting from his wife, so he had to divorce her and realized he didn't have enough to pay the marriage contract, so he was asked if he would have made the vow if he had realized this, and the man said no. The vow can be annulled. The Gemara clarifies that this was dealing with land, not with movable items. It also says from this case that we do actually make an assessment to a debtor to leave him enough for his own basic requirements. It's just that the woman holds onto her kasuba until the husband gets more funds. New Mishnah. We find an opening to annul a vow based on Shabbos and holidays. Some said this would nullify the vows only on the Shabbos and holidays, but not on the rest of the year. But it was later instituted that if part of a vow is annulled, the whole vow is annulled. For instance, if somebody vowed not to benefit from a group of people and the vow is nullified with one of the individuals, it's nullified with all of them. A similar rule, if somebody vowed not to benefit from several people, one after the other, if the vow on the first person becomes nullified, all of them do. If the last one becomes nullified, just that one does. If the middle one becomes nullified, all the vows after him are nullified, but not the ones before. However, if he was specific with each individual, saying, I will not benefit from you, like an offering, and then to another, I will not benefit from you, like an offering, he must have both of these vows annulled separately. Another example, if somebody vowed against having wine for health reasons, and was then told that aged wine is good for you, he can now have aged wine, and therefore the whole vow against wine is annulled. It gives further instances of this concept. The Gemara says the source for this opinion, and also for that aged wine and the other examples it brought that have health benefits. New Mishnah. An opening to annul a vow can be made for the sake of the man's own honor or for the honor of his children. It gives an instance if somebody made a vow and had to divorce his wife and it ended up causing a bad name for him or for his children, the vow can be annulled. A vow can also be nullified, for instance, if somebody vows to not marry somebody for a specific reason, like that they look a certain way, and it turns out that it's just not true. The vow is annulled as it was mistaken from the outset. It gives an instance of somebody who vowed against marrying a woman, but then they spent some time making the woman prettier, and the man was then willing to marry her, and so the vow was annulled. It also said some verses that the daughters of Israel are beautiful, but poverty has taken this away. The Gemara gives further instances of similar cases. It says many related points on such issues occurring in regards to vows and their later modification and similar. And that's the end of Chapter 9. Chapter 10 of Tractate Nedarim continues discussing the laws of vows and their nullification. The first Mishnah says, by a betrothed young woman, her father and husband together nullify her vows. If only one of them nullified the vow, it's not sufficient, and obviously goes into effect if one of them certified the vow. The Gemara clarifies these points, saying, both are required to nullify the vow, and if one nullified it and another certified it, and then the one who certified it removed his certification, it's insufficient, and he also needs to properly nullify it. It cites sources for the further points. These sources and the related verses are further discussed. Others dispute the source and cite another one. Another question, if just one of the two, the husband, nullifies the vow but not the father, does this make no change to the vow or does it weaken it? This has practical ramifications in regards to the punishment for its violation. It cites related lengthy sources to prove this point. It comes out from this that it's a dispute between Beis Shammai, who says he just cuts his half of the vow out, and Beis Hillel, who says it weakens the entire vow. If other asks if you're able to dissolve the certification of your wife's vow so you can nullify it, and also can you remove the nullification in such a vow so that you can certify it? Some rule that a certification can be dissolved, but not a nullification. Another point, if somebody certified a vow twice and then had the first certification nullified, similar to an oath, the second certification still stands. It's also asked, what if somebody certified a vow and then nullified it and said the certification will only take effect if the nullification takes effect? Based on a similar point by animal offering pledges, it says that you can both certify and nullify a vow and have the second part, the nullification, take effect. It does, however, say that you cannot certify and nullify a vow at the same time, as they can't typically be done sequentially anyways. It's similar debate the validity of saying your vow is certified for you today. It's further discussed. New Mishnah, if the father of a betrothed young woman dies, his authority does not transfer to the husband. If the husband dies, his authority does transfer to the father, so here the father has more power. The husband has more power, as in the woman's adulthood, once they fully marry then, the father has no authority, the heir, while the husband fully gets to nullify the vows. The Gemara cites verses as sources for these points. The verses are discussed, and it also says the case where the husband has full jurisdiction over the vow nullification is where the betrothal also happened when she was an adult. This would make it somewhat redundant to a different source, though, so some posit this is actually the source of the law. Some say it's just repeating the latter clause as it cited the first clause. In the Mishnah, if somebody took a vow when betrothed and was immediately divorced the same day and then re-betrothed to somebody else, and this could happen repeatedly, her father and her last husband nullify the vows. Generally, any young woman who hasn't yet entered her own legal jurisdiction can have her vows nullified by her father and her last betrothed husband. The Gemara cites verses as a source for these points. These opinions are discussed. It asks, is a husband's divorce considered like nothing or like the certification of a vow? There's a practical difference if a man divorced his wife and then remarried her as to whether he can now nullify the vow. It debates this point from several different sources, but it remains unresolved. New Mishnah. It was generally the practice to make sure a woman had no standing vows when she went into marriage. So when a woman was about to be married, the father would nullify any and all of her vows, and the husband would do the same during the betrothal. This is necessary to do then, as once they marry, he can't nullify her vows she had made prior to the marriage. The Gemara debates based off this whether a husband can nullify vows of his wife that he's never heard. It's debated from a number of related cases. It's left unresolved. It also asks if a deaf person can nullify his wife's vows. It brings a source which shows that he cannot. It also asks if a husband can nullify the vows of two of his wives simultaneously. Based on a verse in regards to the Sota offering, it implies that it's not allowed. New Mishnah, the typical maximum time from betrothal to marriage was 12 months, and for a widow marrying, it was 30 days. Some say if this time passes, as the husband is now obligated to support the betrothed woman with sustenance, he would also be able to nullify her oaths. Others disagree. The Gemara cites a similar case regarding the levirate marriage to try to figure out what we hold, like it's debated. New Mishnah. A woman pending a levirate marriage, the brother-in-law, even if there are multiple, can nullify her vows during this period. Some say this is only if there's one pending yibum brother. Others say it's not allowed at all, as either there are multiple people doing yibum, so nobody has sole authority, or one person does, but they're just not married yet, so he just has no jurisdiction. The Gemara explains the logic of the last opinion, that they actually either hold that there is no Zika bond, there's no actual legal connection between a widow and her brother-in-law by Yibum. The others would either disagree or say that there was a levirate betrothal, which does affect a levirate bond. The legitimacy of these points are further debated. This is further discussed. New Mishnah. If a husband says to his wife, "Until I arrive, any vow you make is certified," this is invalid. It's debated if he can do this by nullification. Some say yes, as he can nullify vows that have taken effect. He can nullify these. Others say no, as based on a verse, it implies a person can only nullify a vow if he's able to certify that vow. The Gemara says, according to the opinion that you can establish a blanket period of vow nullification for a wife, do these vows take effect for one instant and then immediately get nullified, or do they just not take effect at all? This has practical relevance if somebody hearing the vow said he wants to partake in the vow, meaning if it was valid for just one moment, his vow would take effect, but if it never took effect, neither would the other guys. It debates this question from several sources. It questions it even further, and it derives from a point on ritual impurity laws that he would seemingly hold that the vow doesn't even take effect at all. The opposing opinion would still disagree, again, based on their verse. New Mishnah. The nullification of a vow can be done all day that the vow was taken. This could result in a leniency. For instance, if somebody took a vow Friday night, they'd be able to have it annulled all the way up to Shabbos night, and it can also create a stringency. If somebody took a vow right before nightfall, they have until nightfall to annul the vow. The Gemara says some say the vow can be annulled for the rest of the day, others hold it can be annulled within a 24-hour period after it's said. They cite verses and debate them. It also cites a later source which allows nullifying vows on Shabbos, but it asks, can you nullify vows related to Shabbos on Shabbos, or even all vows? It's said that according to the opinion that vow nullification can be for the rest of the day on Shabbos, you can nullify any vow, as that would be your only opportunity to do so. According to the opinion that it's within 24 hours after, you can only nullify Shabbos-related vows, as other vows can just be nullified after Shabbos. In regards to asking an authority to dissolve your vow on Shabbos, it's questioned if this is permissible if you had time to do it before Shabbos started. Some say yes, some say only with a single expert, not with a panel of 3, which resembles a court, which isn't allowed to convene on Shabbos. Others disagree, saying 3 men annulling a vow does not resemble a court, so it would be allowed on Shabbos. It's also said that you can request a vow nullification even at nightfall. It's discussed as to who agrees with this. Some even say that a vow can be requested to be nullified when the judge is standing or alone at night on Shabbos by his relatives, and even when it was possible for the vow to have been nullified before Shabbos. The sage Rabbi Gamliel would not stand when nullifying vows, but that's because he held differently than this opinion that the nullification of a vow requires that it be from a level of regret, so he had to sit to examine the case. In fact, further based on the verse, taking vows is generally considered such an improper thing to do. It's considered to be like a sin, even if you end up fulfilling it. If somebody tries to annul a vow with some vague wording, like, I do not want you to vow, or this is not a vow, that's not valid to nullify a vow. If somebody instead said, you have done well, or I would have taken that vow myself, or something similar, that's a valid certification for the vow. By nullifying a wife's vow on Shabbos, it says you shouldn't just verbally nullify it, you should actually have the person violate the vow and then mentally nullify it. Some say it also works to mentally nullify a vow the rest of the week. A husband cannot nullify his wife's vow with the terminology of a course nullification, and the same applies vice versa. It cites verses and for the discussion of these points. It's also said that if a husband refuses to nullify his wife's vow to annoy her, he's still allowed to nullify it days later. It's further discussed, and it says that silence by mistake is considered like silence to annoy by these laws. And that's the end of chapter 10.